This video covers the major steps to set up xLights for use with the AlphaPix Evolution and AlphaPix Classic controllers. The first step is to install xLights. Navigate to xlights.org and click the download page. This will then bring you to the current installation, and in our particular case we will be using version 2025.09. You will need to install this. Note that it is not a signed application and you will need to bypass security to install that onto a Windows machine. There are Macintosh versions and you can scroll down here how to install on a Mac. Now, the assumptions here also are that you have already set up and configured the controller to be accessible over the network. Please see our other videos for in-depth tutorials on how to complete that process. In this particular setup, we are using DHCP assigned controllers, so this PC is talking to the network, which is then talking to the controllers. We do not have a direct connection with the controllers. Either option is perfectly fine. So, step 1, download xLights. Step 2, make sure that you can reach your controllers on the network. Again, see our other videos. So, you should now be able to see your controllers and they are accessible. In this particular case, you can see our controller down here in the bottom right, which is what we'll be setting up today. Now, once we successfully have our controller connected and we have its IP address, we can now set up xLights. We'll go ahead and open up xLights. Now, the first recommendation when you're first setting up xLights is to set the show directory to a location that is secure and easily locatable. Changing the directory over time can create confusion, and it's very common for people to put these directories onto locations that do get erased or have problems. So if you have a cloud synchronization tool such as OneDrive, we do recommend putting that onto those locations. Everything that you will do in xLights will go into this directory. You can create multiple directories for different types of shows such as Halloween and Christmas. That is outside the scope of this particular video. Again, the key takeaway here is have a directory, put it into a common place, commonly on the desktop or onto a drive, and make sure that that directory cannot be deleted or has backups. All right, now that we have our xLights installed, we have three major tabs at the top. We have controllers, layout, and sequencers. So, we are going to do them in this order. We never start with sequencing first. Always start with the controllers, then the layout, and then finally, once we have everything working in these two layers, we then build upon that using the sequencer. All right, now in the controllers tab, this is where you would enter all the controllers. Now in this particular case, we're going to add two different controllers, an AlphaPix Classic and Evolution. And because both of these controllers are Ethernet, we're going to go ahead and add Ethernet button on the left side. This adds an empty controller name, and we're going to just go ahead and give it a name. Now, if you have multiple controllers, it is good to go ahead and just label them. You might put AlphaPix Evolution Left Yard, for example, and that lets you know that you do have it in the left yard. Go for the vendor and select HolidayCoro. Then select Flex, which is actually the Evolution. It may also say Evolution. All right. We can go ahead and leave auto layout models and auto size. We're going to show you a feature within xLights that allows us to use the configuration ability to set up the controller. All right, so next thing we want to do is go ahead and enter our IP address of a controller, and you can see in the background here my address is going to be for this particular controller 10.0.0.191, and again that's going to be your local controller address. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and you can see that it has saved that information in here. All right, so to make it a little more accessible, I'm going to just drag this up a little bit. We have a few things down here. Again, we're going to come back to the visualizer later. This button will be used to upload some configuration, and typically if we are monitoring the controller, we will see some sort of green light often when the controller is online. All right, now at this point, we have added the controller to xLights, and now we need to configure the models. Now, models are virtual representations of all the things that are physically connected to the controller. And it is critical, absolutely critical, that the models that we create, use, or configure absolutely match the real world. For example, if you have a megatree and it has 16 strings by 50 pixels, you need to have exactly that number of pixels. If it is a 180-degree tree, it needs to be defined as a 180. If any of these things differ between the models in the virtual world under the layout and the real world, you will receive unpredictable results. All right, now this is not going to cover all of the uniqueness that exists within models because there are many different types of models. Along the top here, we have some standard or canned models for very common applications, such as arches. I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to left drag here. And this is just an arch. If we have a candy cane, we can add candy canes here. And you can move these around. You can also flip them around like this. And of course, you can then drag them out and make them different sizes, flip them, all kinds of different things. Now, if you are installing models for a prop, such as a singing face or a spinner or other type of effect, you would want to go ahead and go up here to Import Custom and import your model here using the model data. Now, we have other videos on our website on how to download and install models from HolidayCoro. All right, now we go ahead and add all of our particular models. I'm going to go ahead and add a line here. This might be an outline for a house, and we could also add a mega tree here. All right, so let's go through some common things that we need to configure for the model. Now I'm going to just drag this out. And first is name your model logically. Now, if you have arches on the left side and the right side, make them say, for example, arch left yard. Then press enter. If you get this notice, don't worry about that. We don't have any sequences, so we can say no. Now, you may have to configure the model specific to your particular requirements. For example, the HolidayCoro quick arches have multiple layers possible. So we may need to check off layers and then put in how many layers we have and then define how many pixels are on each of those layers, for example. So that is critical, and make sure that your models, again, absolutely match what the real world is. So if you've built an arch and it has 3 layers, it needs to have 3 layers in here. Now, if you'd like to look at how the actual models are connected and wired, you can right-click on them. You can go to them, right-click, and then say Wiring View. And you can drag this out, and you can see that this is showing from the reverse view. In other words, if you're standing behind the model, this is typically the side you would put the pixels in. And in this particular case, you can see that it's listed out all of my pixel counts. In this case, it has 150, and there's 3 layers. And it's telling you exactly how the wires should be physically laid out. In this particular case, you can see that if I'm standing behind the arch, I need to connect the first pixel to here on the right side of the arch. And then I need to go up over and then back through the middle and then back, and then we'll end inside. Now, if any of these things don't match how you've actually built your model, again, modify your model. Some of the common things are, let's say that you want to start, instead of on this side, you want to start on the other side. We can do that by going to starting location. Now, when you're viewing it in the layout view, this is from the front side of the models. But when we do the wiring, we're looking at it from the back side. So that's an important key distinction to understand. And it goes back and forth. So inside layout, front. Now, here, let's say that we want to start, instead of on the outside green dot, we want to start on the blue inside dot. Again, we'll just change that. We can save that, right click, say wiring view, and now if again we are looking from the back side, you can see not only has it moved it from the outside starting point to the inside, but it's also moved it from this side on the right reverse view to this side on the left of the reverse view. So Again, make sure that your models absolutely perfectly align with your real world models. All right, some other items on a line, for example, within a house outline, you may have, let's say, house outline 1, and I'm going to go ahead, and if I have a duplicate, I can just hit Control C and Control V, and then it'll create a copy of that. And I'll move that down here. Okay, so now we have 2 lines, and we'll use this later to configure it. Now let's say we're doing a house outline. Well, let's say that this is actually not 50 pixels, it's 72 pixels. And again, you need to take in consideration where you're starting. So for example, in this case, let's say that we have this string, and then this string later goes from here, from the green to the blue, and then over here, green to the blue. So we're going to daisy chain these together. Well, let's say that the first one, again, starts at the green. Great, we've got green, and if it's, let's say, 72 pixels, great, push enter. We've saved that. And let's say this has 24 pixels. And we'll go ahead and save that. Now you may see controller right here and it says no controller. Don't be concerned at this point about that. This is not necessary to configure. Now, ideally you can also just click in this area and you can also still set up a background. You can set up a background of your house and draw on your house. You'll also see that xLights is adjusting the number of pixels because here we have 24, but here we have 72, and those lines are about, well, they are exactly the same, and it's adjusted the spacing. So again, make sure that these are perfect. All right, and then here's our tree, for example. It's common that most trees are 180 in a residential, so make sure you put that in there. If you have 16 strings, we need to make sure that that says 16. And if you have 100 pixels, for example, make sure you put 100 in here. And make sure to always hit that save button. All right, so see our other videos on how to set up models. And of course, you can also use the xLights manual. You can use AI. And there are hundreds of videos on YouTube of how to use layout and models. So this is not really specific to the hardware, but it is, again, important to make sure that your models match the real world. All right, now once you've got all of your props in here, now we can go ahead and map these items. So these things, models, have to be then controlled by a controller. So we're going to go back to the Controllers tab, click on the controller that we're going to connect those particular models to, and we're going to go down here to the right and say Visualize. This will bring up the visualizer. What this is effectively just a big drag and drop system for pixels and where they go. Now, let's go ahead and look at our controller and see what our controller physically has. So let's flip over here. Now in our particular case, we have a differential board that is outputs 1 through 16. We do not have any expansion board on 1 through 32. And then we have direct SPIs on 33 through 48. Now those SPIs are these down here at the bottom. And we can't see it, but this long range board is actually underneath the CPU. Now on an AlphaPix Evolution controller, the long ranges are very simple. They use what are called long range regular receivers, and those regular receivers act just like normal cables. You just simply have them moved to a remote location. So this first 4 would be the first jack. On the far left, this is the second jack, third jack, and then finally the 4th jack if you do have that. And see our other YouTube videos about how to configure all of these settings if you need to do that manually. All right, so back to xLights here. So we know that these are long range up here. So the first right here is going to be long range regular. And let's just pretend that we do have a long range regular hooked up to the far left jack. And let's say that that's out in our yard. All right, so I'm just going to drag that arch over here and just drop it on there. Now, because long range regular, which is used on the AlphaPix class regular AlphaPix Evolution, is just a normal connection, you don't have to set it up as long range. Now, whenever you right-click this, you'll see that there is no long range here. Now, you can also set brightness, null pixels, and color order. Normally, these two right here are not necessary. It is very common to set brightness, depending upon the number of pixels you have configured. And a common amount is, for example, 50. And you can go ahead and do that on a per output or per prop basis. All right. So, now let's go down here and go to our connections on the output 33 through 48. Now 33 through 48 again are our direct SPI outputs. Now we do have a pixel right here. It is hooked up to output 35 and we're going to be testing that today. So we're going to go back to our xLights and we're going to be putting our ALS outline on port 35. Now it has 72 pixels. And we're also going to daisy chain house outline 2 to the end of that. So data is going to come out of port 35, go to the first outline, then go to the second outline. So these are daisy chained together. And you can see that xLights has told you that there are actually 96 total pixels. So it's added up to 72 plus 24 to get 96 pixels. Now, if we have other props, we could then add them in here. Now, I'll add this in as an error because this has 16 outputs, but we've already used one of these outputs. And that means it rolls down to 49, 50, 51. That's not possible because there are not 49, 50, and 51 on this controller. So that is not possible. So anytime you see an error down here, this indicates that there's something wrong and you need to make a correction. So let's pretend that our mega tree doesn't have 16 strings. Let's pretend that it has 12 strings. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll go back to controllers, visualize, and if we go back to our tree now, you can see that it's using 12 outputs, strings 1 through 12, and we now have no error here. Let's say that we have our candy canes on the last output 48. All right, so we have now mapped everything out in here. A few things to also keep aware of. We can change the size of these boxes. So if you have a lot of items, you can scroll those and make them larger or smaller as you have a larger or smaller display. And you can also change how this font works. Now, less obvious is you can go in here and right click and say, for example, print. And you can print out this configuration. This can serve effectively as a map or a set of blueprints for your display. Why? Because when you go to build out your display, you may need out in the yard, hey, where does my arch hook up to? Well, it hooks up to the AlphaPix Evo left yard with this IP address, and it's going to go on port 1, and then it would have these others. You can also save this as a spreadsheet. So if you wish to edit that, you may want to put in special information that's necessary and customize that. So this can be very helpful. We also have hide models assigned to other controllers. So this means that we don't see models that are assigned if you have multiple controllers. So that would be typical. All right, now we have everything here. It's all ready to go. And let's go ahead and take a look at our controller prior to updating it. Now you can see it just has the default standard 170 pixels on every single output. And all the universes are just one universe per output. What xLights is going to do is it's going to pack those all up and only use, in this particular case, 9 universes. This is to save universes to make it more efficient. So we're going to go ahead and click the Upload Output button. And what will happen is it will upload the configuration into the controller. Okay, we've now uploaded the configuration into the controller, and it has automatically triggered the controller to reboot. So if we go back to the controller and we hit the refresh button, we will now see that it has 150 pixels with 50% output for output 1. And it's left all this other existing information because that just doesn't matter since nothing's connected. But then we come down here and we can see that for the outputs 35 through 48, which we do have configured, it has configured the number of pixels, in this particular case 96 for our 2 house outlines, and then all of our megatree plus our candy cane. And it's automatically set all the channels and pixel counts and universes for this controller. So now this is completely set up. Now what we can do is go back to the controller and do a test. We never want to start testing using a sequence. Never. We always want to go in here to the xLights, go to Tools, then Test, and this will bring up a box that will allow us to test. Now there's a bunch of different tabs along the top for testing various different things. Now, first is we can just literally blast out data to every single output on the controller. Now, this is done at the universe and controller level. In this particular case, this is probably not as useful as testing individual models because you would need to know which particular item is where. Now, on the right-hand side is how we're going to output that data. Now, we're just right now just blasting out data to every single channel on the controller that we've configured for our show, which is 4,590 channels. I should note that that's not pixels. Pixels are usually comprised of 3 channels. All right, so over here, we are using either the standard output, which we could do, and this is background only, and if we go to background intensity, if we look at this pixel right here, you'll see that if I scroll up or down, you'll see that the pixel is changing brightness. That's because it's just putting out the entire brightness level, which could be from on DMX 255 to 0, which is off. But we may want to go ahead and do RGB lights. We can do specific colors. For example, in this particular case, we've got red or green or blue. And again, I've just got background color. Or if we would like, we can also do red, green, blue. Now, in this particular case, this is the order in which the pixels are located. So it really says ABC, but it's really actually red, green, blue. Now, it's red, green, blue, and all. And all is red, green, blue altogether, which in this particular case is white. Now, I can go down here and change how fast those rotate. Now, this is useful to help you locate and ensure that your pixels are not stuck or anything. So, by changing between each color, one, you can check to make sure that all of your pixels are working for each individual color. You could have a pixel that, let's say, for example, the blue LED is not working. And this will help you locate that that specific color on that specific pixel is not working. And then white allows you to make sure that they're all working. Also, that makes sure that the power is working correctly and you don't overcommit power. And then the speed is just how quick you wish to have these cycle through there. So it's very common to use this as a test mode. All right, now let's move out of outputs to model groups. Now, in this particular case, we do not have model groups. Groups are groups of individual items. That might be all of your arches or all of your house outline. Now, the next one is models. Now, this is the most common place we would come after we configure our show in the controller, and we're just testing each model. What you want to do is test one at a time. Now, I've gone ahead and turned them all on, so let's turn them off here, and we'll go over here. Now, you'll also see that there is a connection between models, and if we go over here to outputs, you'll notice exactly which universe and channels these are connected to. Now, if you ever click one of these and then other things turn on, or partially turn on, that means you have an incorrect configuration in most cases. You have overlapping channels. Now, that normally should never occur if you are using the visualizer function and you're not manually configuring controllers or props, models. All right, now, in this particular case, we have the arch yard left, and that's not what we have here. We're going to do the house outline. That is the string that goes first into output 35, and we can see that our pixels are successfully changing color for that. So that means that this is working correctly. Now, we can also go down to individual pixel levels or even colors within a pixel. So I've expanded over here on the left, and I can now see all 72 pixels or nodes in here. So I can even expand that further and do individual colors. So we are looking at output 35 right here, and if I just click this, we can see that that does not turn on what we're expecting. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So in this particular case, this is doing something unusual. We can see that the other pixels in the string, oh, actually I am wrong. Here it is. I had the wrong pixel. I am so sorry. That is actually pixel 2, and this is pixel 1. So I'm going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to turn this off again. I can turn on red only. And it's blinking because we're still doing this cycle. I'm going to do green, blue, or turn on the entire pixel, which will do red, green, blue, white. Now if we come over here and we just on background, we could also do that too. So we can go like this, and here, green, blue. Now, why would you want to click on individual pixels? The reason is that you may need to check a model or find an individual pixel where a problem is occurring. For example, let's say that you look up on your house and you say, oh, it seems like one of the pixels on the upper house outline 1 are not working. And you need to know exactly which one is not working, so when you take it down to repair it, you can do that. You could go in and turn on each individual pixel and say, okay, it's not that one, okay, it's not that one's working, this one, and you can see them in the background turning on one at a time. Now, that then allows you to say this exact pixel out of 72, 9, let's say that we turn on 10 and it doesn't work, that's pixel 10 that's got the problem. This is also very useful if you're troubleshooting a prop. Props have to have pixels installed in an exact path, and it's not uncommon for people to maybe miss a hole or skip over a hole or put a pixel in the incorrect hole. You would go back to the model, look at the model, and see our other videos on how to print out model diagrams if you don't have a diagram on the back of your model, your physical prop. And you can turn on each individual pixel one at a time, look at the prop, and confirm, oh, okay, I have pixel 10 turned on, and that is the actual pixel 10 location in the prop. So you can turn them on one at a time until you go through that. So as you can see here, this is very, very useful for troubleshooting. And we want to make sure that absolutely, and again, I cannot stress enough, make sure that all props are working absolutely perfect before you install or configure sequences. All right, let's move over to the Model tab. This is where you can do an individual model, and this allows you to kind of see the individual line. So in this particular case, you can see that I have turned on over here just 10 pixels of the 72, and here's what it actually looks like. You can see just 10 pixels, and the grayed out ones are the other pixels, the other 62 pixels in that area. And so that allows you to see, okay, this is what I'm turning on or off. Now, why would this be useful? If your particular model has a submodel, I'll give you an example. Let's say that your submodel has a singing face that has eyes. You may want to go in here and you may see under your model eyes, maybe eyes open. And then you would come to your model and you would see what should be happening in the model. So xLights thinks it should look a certain way. This is the way xLights thinks this particular model should look. If it doesn't look like that on your actual real prop, stop. Figure out why that is happening. All right. And then we have individual controllers, and here we can look at the port level, and you can see because I have these models turned on. So let's just turn off the tree and just leave the outline here, which is hooked up to, and we don't, let's say no, we can go over to the controllers and we can scroll down here and we can see pixel port 35 is turned on, which is again this right here, house outline, and that tells us, hey, where did I have this house outline hooked up? Maybe you don't remember from your visualizer. You can go in here and take a look. And you can see that on port 35, it actually has two things hooked up to it. It has this one and this one. If I then turn this on, you can now see I have the entire string of lights. And if I come back over to models, you'll now see that it has both of these turned on. So these all are interconnected here. So that is just another way to easily find and troubleshoot your props. Now you'll see that these say unavailable, and that's because they are not configured. We did not have anything connected to them. All right, again, I will stress, do not move on to sequencing, test with sequencing until the test lights function works perfect for every single prop you have. Now, if you have problems where you believe that a particular prop is not working correctly and you can't get it to work in xLights and it's correctly configured, or you believe it is, you can then switch over to the controller and make sure that it's not a hardware problem. Let's say that we have this house outline, and if we go to the controller, again, the house outline is hooked up to output 35, and how do we know that? We go to the controllers tab, we look, and we say, oh, okay, house outline is hooked up here. If it is not working correctly, in other words, you turn it on, and let's say the pixels are acting odd, or all the pixels don't come on. Let's say that you have all the pixels turned on, like we do here, but all the pixels are not actually turning on. At that point, we don't know if it is the xLights configuration or the controller configuration or the actual pixels. So we can come back over to xLights and invoke the test. We could go up here and we could do test configuration. We would select configured lights, and we do have other videos about how to use this test mode in depth. You can also invoke this test mode at the menu option right here using an M button by pressing and holding. We could then do configured lights and update test mode. Now you'll notice that it's currently white, which is what we're sending from xLights. The test mode will override xLights data. At this point, the controller is now ignoring all the data from xLights and is now generating its own data. And in this particular case, we can see that the controller is in test mode, and you can see that it says press and hold, choose the mode. In this case, we're using this. We can see that if we select the various different colors by using the up and ground, we got green. Now, at this point, if you were to test and your lights are not working correctly, in other words, they are all not working and coming on, that is one of two problems. Either one, there's a problem with the pixels. Maybe you've got a bad pixel, a bad wiring connection, something like that. Or if the pixels aren't coming on at all, you could have a blown fuse or a tripped polyfuse. See our other videos on controller level pixel testing for more details on that. But if the pixels do work properly in hardware test mode and don't work in xLights, that is an indication that we are working with a configuration issue in xLights. And in the vast majority of cases, that is going to be an issue within the xLights models. So you'd want to go back to your layout and just double, triple, quadruple check. Make sure that you right-click on the models and then you look at them in terms of a wiring outline and make sure that you have everything properly set up. And again, use the test function in here also to make sure that all those pixels are properly mapped in the right way. It's at that point that you can then move on to doing sequencing. This is outside the scope of this hardware and is purely a xLights issue or question, and will be something that you can handle with xLights documentation. We hope this has been helpful, and of course, if you always have any questions about your HolidayCoro project or product, please feel free to reach out to us at holidaykoro.com/contact us.